Okay, first off, I wanted to touch on a couple things that my advocate said. She claimed that, they actually both claimed, that compared to how many people were voting, the results were pretty close. And pretty close, I say again, is not good enough when referring to the popular vote, because it's pretty close that what the people wanted was accurately represented, and that's not what our government has apparently been about. It's been about equality and all that was good. And though, yes, the popular vote outweighing the electoral vote and the years that faithless electors did not turn out more than 50% of the events, if say the Supreme Court had dismissed the one case of Gideon versus Wainwright, the entire future would have been changed. So the same with President Bush and Gore. Though Bush didn't win the popular vote and got the electoral vote, what would have happened if Gore had figured out a way to get those votes, and the future would be completely changed right now. And my opponent also avoided the statement that of popular will and the fact that third parties do not receive any recognition, that sometimes the person is elected in less than 50% of the population, so I just wanted to touch on that. Also, my advocate also questioned the validity of my claim that the number of candidates that won the electoral but not the popular vote was 3, and questioned my source. I openly admit that my source was usgovernmentinfo.com, and that makes me question in turn the validity of her source, and that one of these sources is yes indeed wrong, but it's not necessarily guaranteed that it is my source. And though the Electoral College does not isolate corruption, my opponent does not take into account that the corruption of faithless electors, which occurs about the same amount as maybe the corruption that would recall a state recount, though I think a state recount is probably a little less. In this case, the direction of the election in place of the Electoral College to reflect the popular will is worth a recount. The risk of direct election is an annoying recount, yes, but the risk of the Electoral College, like electing someone who's completely not what the people wanted, I think is worse off. And I wanted to touch a couple more on the events that the Electoral College can end up using Congress to decide outcomes. In several elections of the 20th century, in 1912, 1948, 1960, and 1968, third-party candidates won electoral votes. It is certainly within the realm of possibility in a three-way race that no candidate would reach the magic number of 270 electoral votes. Even in a two-way race, it is possible for neither candidate to win a majority by tying 269-269. If no candidate hits 270, the election would go to the House, where the Constitution provides that each state delegate would have one vote regardless of its population. This gives small states an even stronger advantage that they have in the college. If the House election tied, or if enough delegates split evenly, this situation would become more complicated. In this situation, Section 3 of the 20th Amendment would take control. Assuming that the Senate were able to choose the vice president-elect, he would become the acting president until Congress could devise a method for choosing a president. If the Senate were unable to choose a vice president, then the Speaker of the House next in line in the order of the succession of the presidency would act as president until the president-elect or vice president-elect could be determined. And then also, I wanted to touch on the Electoral College is guilty of disenfranchisement, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, it's depriving people of voting rights. And this is because they oppose the Electoral College. They basically give disproportionately amplified voting rights to the smaller states, and in the larger states, it reduces their proportional contribution to the final election result, which isn't fair to the people in the different states. And then the Electoral College also undermines democratic principles, because democratic principles is that everyone is equal, everyone deserves a fair and equal chance, and most Americans believe that the person who receives the most votes should become president. So direct election is seen more consistent with democratic principles than in the Electoral College system.